Hey everyone, in this video I'm going to build a waterfall with equity multiple hurdles. This is a slightly different structure than the more commonly seen waterfall with IRR hurdles, but it's quite useful especially when a long-term hold is projected. Like in the previous waterfall video, I've gone ahead and filled out the formatting to save some time, and I've inputted some random equity investments and cash flows. So to start, we'll input the general structure in the top left. Let's say the general partner is going to contribute 5% of the total equity, in which case the limited partner would contribute 1 minus 5% or 95%. And for the preferred return, let's just choose 8%, something pretty standard. And for the first tier, this is going to be everything that exceeds the 8% preferred return and after the general partner and limited partner have both received their equity contributions back. So everything above that up until, let's say, a 1.5x return, we will distribute to the GP 25% of the cash flows and 1 minus 25% or 75% of the cash flows to the LP. And then we want to say everything above 1.5x in total distributions up until, let's call it a 2x multiple, will be distributed 35% to the GP and 1 minus 35% or 65% to the LP. So then everything above a 2x, we will distribute 50-50 between the GP and the LP. And that's going to be the structure for this waterfall. Okay, so now that that's taken care of, let's go in and start filling out the equity contributions by partner. And the general partner is going to contribute 5%. The limited partner will contribute 95%. And we'll sum that up for a total of 100%. So what we'll do is we'll take the 5%, we'll lock in the column, and then we'll lock in the row for the total equity contributions. So we can now copy this down and across. And that's the distributions by partner. We'll sum those up for a total of $1,050,000, and here's how it's distributed by each partner. So I've just put in some cash flow after debt service numbers that I've made up. And so our total net cash flow for the project will be the total equity contributions plus the total cash flow. And there we go. Now let's sum all these up and let's fill out our return. So the IRR for the project itself is 16.45, and the equity multiple, it's going to be the absolute value of the total cash flow divided by the total equity contributions. The absolute value function is just making sure both are positive numbers. The other way you can do this is you could say the absolute value of the net cash flow divided by the total equity contributions plus 1, and that'll give you the same number. Okay, so we discussed this section briefly at the start, and here's what's going to happen. We're going to return all equity to both partners, and then we're going to distribute an 8% preferred return right up here. So that's going to be under the interest accrual section. Let's bring that down. And so this tier 1 should be equal to an 8% IRR to the partners. So our beginning of period balance is going to be the ending period balance from the previous period. And then our equity investments are just pulled from up top, our total equity contributions. And our interest accrual is going to be the 8% times the outstanding balance from the previous period. That's carried into this period. And then the distributions are going to be the minimum of the cash flow that's available in this period and the negative sum of the beginning of period balance, the equity investments, and the interest accrual. And our end of period balance is going to be everything added up together. So I'll copy this across and explain what's going on. So here we contribute $1 million in year 0 at the closing. And we have $1 million outstanding at the end of the period because there were no cash flows, right? Then in period 2, this $1 million carries over. We contributed an additional $50,000 in capital, probably for repairs. We accrued 80% in owed interest by the end of year 1 on the $1 million outstanding. And we have $65,000 in distributions, right? So when you sum all of this up, you're left with $1,065,000 outstanding for the deal. And then that carries over into the next period in which you're paying interest on that. And that goes all the way until there's enough cash flow to pay off everything that's outstanding to achieve an 8% IRR. And we'll do the calculation right now. All of the equity investments plus the distributions, and let's check the IRR. 8%. So there you go. And let's sum up, because this is an equity multiple hurdle structure, let's sum up the total distributions here. And then we're going to break this up by GP and LP. So this is going to be based on initial equity contributions because it's pro rata or pari passu. And what we're going to do is we're going to lock in the column for 5%. We will lock in the row for the distributions. And then we can copy this down and across, and it will give us our distributions by capital partner for this tier. There we go. And those are our total distributions right here. So our cash flow to tier 2, what's that going to be? Well, that's going to be all of our cash flows for the deal minus what's already been distributed in this tier. So we have $1,026,949 flowing into the next tier. Okay, so now to the interesting part. We get to the equity multiple hurdles. And let's see. Let's pull this down in column C. So we want everything above the 8% up until we achieve 1.5x on our money. And that's going to be distributed 25% to the GP, 75% to the LP. Now let's figure this out. So what is 1.5x of, well, let's do an absolute value function. 1.5x times our total equity contributions, $1,575,000. But you'll see up here we've already distributed $1,638,000 right here in the deal. So that already exceeds tier 2 because this took a while and we needed all this cash flow to achieve an 8% IRR over the course of 7 years. So this is going to end up being 0, but we're going to fill this out and then we'll go back at the end and we'll tweak the equity multiples to have this fill out properly. So we take the absolute value of this, but we don't need to distribute $1,575,000 in this tier since we've already distributed this. So we want to input a max function, a maximum of 0, and the absolute value of 1.5x times $1,050,000 minus what's already been distributed in the deal thus far, right? So why did we put the max function in? Well, the second part of this absolute value less the distributions function, that's going to end up negative. And we don't want a negative here. If it's a negative, we want it to return 0. So we put the maximum of 0 and this formula. See, if we were to take this out, we're left with a negative, and we can't distribute negative cash flows here. So we need the max function. And lock that in. I should lock this in by the column. And E35, I should lock that in as well. Okay. And so here's what we're going to do in each tier. We want to distribute the minimum of the cash flow available in the tier to tier 2 and E60, right? So distributions to tier 2 minus the sum of what's already been distributed. So this is pretty similar to what we did in tier 1, but differs in a way. And let me lock in E60, which is our distributions to tier 2, the calculation, the equity multiple. So let's go up here real quick and let's just change this to 2x. And here we have distributions, right? So let's leave this as 2x for now. We're distributing 461,000 of the 1,026,000 in tier 2. And then everything above the 461,000 is going to flow into tier 3. So this is going to be distributed 25%. So lock in the column, lock in the row, copy down and across, 2575 by partner. And then down here, let's add up our total GP and LP distributions. And then let's also add in a total deal level distributions. So the total, the GP received row 53 plus row 61. And we can copy this down and across, and those are our total distributions by partner so far up until the end of tier 2. And our total distributions, 2.1 million, which is 2 times the 1,050,000 right here. There we go. Now our cash flows to tier 3. As I mentioned, this is going to be the cash flow to tier 2 less what is distributed in tier 2. And we'll copy that across. So we have 565,000 flowing into tier 3. Now let's change tier 3 to 2.5x. And tier 4 is everything above 2.5x. So it's going to be the same formula. We can copy this down. And I don't think this copied properly. Right, we'll have to adjust this. So equals 2.5x. Less what's already been distributed, so E48. Okay, so here's what's going on. We're taking the maximum of 0, and the same thing, 2.5 times 1,050,000 returns positive, less what's already been distributed. But we need to factor in what's been distributed in tier 2 as well. So that's why we calculated this number, the total distributions in tier 2. Lock that in. $525,000 is owed in tier 3. So let's do the same thing. Let's use a min function of the cash flow to tier 3 and 525,000 less what's already been distributed. And let's lock in 525. Let's lock in this as well. Did I lock that in up here? I did. Perfect. And then this will be distributed 35-65, the same way we did it before. Copying down and across. And then we'll have our total distributions. We'll have our total distributions from the previous tier, tier 2, plus everything that's distributed in tier 3. And we can copy this down and across. We can sum it up. Let's sum these up. Okay. So let's just check this out. 2,625,000 has been distributed by the end of tier 3. So is that what's needed? 1,050,000 times 2.5. Yep. 2.625 million. So we're all set here. Now, everything above tier 3 will flow into tier 4. So that's cash flows to tier 3 less what's distributed in tier 3. And that leaves $40,000 to be distributed 50-50. So our cash flows to tier 4 will simply be cash flows above tier 3. Copy this across. And then our GP distributions in this tier will be 50%. And our LP distributions will be 50% for a total of 100%. So we'll lock in the column, lock in the row, copy this down and across, and sum it all up. There we go. So those are our total tier 4 distributions. Okay, so now in the cash flows by equity partner section, all we're doing is summing everything up for each partner that's been distributed, and we're going to calculate returns for each partner, and then we'll just check to make sure everything is correct in the model. So for the general partner, the equity investment, we have this up top. This is the $50,000 and the $2,500. And then the cash flows will be summed up from each tier. But since we already calculated the totals for each tier, for example, by tier 2, a total of 2.1 has been distributed. By tier 3, 2.625. We can just take tier 3 plus everything that's distributed above that in tier 4. And that's going to give us our total contributions and our total cash flows. And we can sum these up. Okay. So for our net proceeds, we have $348,640, and our IRR to the general partner will be 36.5%, and our equity multiple will be the absolute value of 401,000 divided by 52,500, 7.64x, and the percentage of total profits will be the total cash flows divided by the total deal level cash flows up here, the 2.665 million. So 15.1% of total profits to the GP. Now, the equity investment for the LP, same thing. Let's pull that from up top. The cash flows, again, same thing. Tier 3, everything that's been distributed up until the end of tier 3, plus what's distributed in tier 4 to the LP. We'll sum that up, copy it across, and then we'll sum everything up. So we have net proceeds of 1.266 million. We have an IRR to the LP of 14.51%. We have an equity multiple of the total cash flows divided by the total equity investment by this partner, 2.27, and percentage of total profits will be the cash flows divided by the total deal level cash flows right here. Oops, no need for that. Okay, so we have 84.9% plus 15.1% is 100%. That's correct. And there we go. So we can check to make sure everything's right by using the percentage of total profits. That should add up. We've checked in each tier. 2.625 is 2.5 times. 2.1 is 2 times the 1,050,000. And so now we can play around with this, and let's go back to what we had originally. 1.5x, 2x, and 2x. And we'll see in tier 2 there are no distributions, right? Because 1.5 times 1,050,000 is 1,575, but 1,638's already been distributed. So that means everything's flowing to tier 3, in which it's distributed as such up until 2x, 3565, and then everything above that is distributed 50-50. So the general partner in this instance will receive a much higher share of the profits, closer to 20% and a 10x multiple. This is because the splits are higher in tiers 3 and tiers 4, so they're getting a greater percentage of the total deal. So there are a number of different ways you could do this. You could play around with it, and you could say 1.75x, and then 2.5. It all depends on who you are. Are you the GP or are you the LP? And this is part of the negotiating process. Now we're at 16 and 84, 8.14x multiple and a 2.24x multiple. So this is all part of the negotiating process between GP and LP, and how you end up with the final numbers is up to you. But hopefully you found that helpful, and let me know if you have any questions.